Welcome. My cat just pressed record for me, so that's very timely. I was about to press it myself, but she decided to walk across the keyboard, and now she's kind of hiding behind my computer. I've just been back from a full moon walk and ritual, and this month, which is the month of June, I decided to focus on abundance and what that means. So online friend and I were talking a little bit about abundance and how that's often misunderstood as gaining material possession. But abundance actually is much more broad than that, much more all-encompassing, and so my ritual focused on that. I'm pretty sure this friend is going to write a blog about that, so I'll just wait for her to do that rather than make a video about my thoughts on abundance. Anyway, this video is actually something a little bit different. It's something I've been doing for quite a few months now. I've been looking at different types of Persian divination, essentially, which is often referred to as morva or fal or tafa'ol in Persian, and just looking at all the various layers of divination that happen in Persia and in Iran and Iranian mythology. I won't go too much into all the different sorts because there are plenty. There's plenty to read about, everything from reading bones through to reading the livers of deceased animals is another one. In the Quran, it talks about Shahab, which is essentially meaning a reading of the stars, so falling stars, and essentially that's a belief that that God, when jinn are near heaven, and if they're at all misbehaved, if they lie, if they steal, the jinn are thrown from heaven as essentially as Shahab, as falling stars, as falling comets or meteorites that we see through the sky. And that is also a Persian form of divination, being able to watch the stars as they fall and having an understanding of what that means and what that means for us personally and what that means more broadly. What I'm actually going to be talking about, like I mentioned before, for a few months now, I've actually been practicing fālgūš, which is a particular type of divination, which is essentially overhearing. My cat's going crazy at the moment. She's just running around everywhere. Is essentially, fālgūš is essentially a type of divination which is listening into conversations to get answers. So some people would see that as sticky beaking, but if you wrap a bit of wrap some practice around that, how that is, it's not actually just sitting there and having a good old listen to what people are saying. It's far from that. So I'm going to talk about fālgūš and give you a bit of an example of how that's done. So just a short video on this type of divination. So how I go about doing it, I do keep a journal. I keep a journal with lots of weird random stuff in it, and if I open up to, I don't know, a random page, I've got a lot of random stuff in my journal. But anyway, like here's a random page. I don't know whether you can see that, but it's got like rabbits and numbers and all sorts of things, and symbols. So I do keep a journal, and I've been keeping a journal for a few months now on fālgūš and my practice of fālgūš and how that's been working for me, and it's worked very well. So I thought I would want to share the practice or the technique in which I use to undertake fālgūš or to undertake divination through listening to other people's conversations or snippets of other people's conversations. So how I go about doing it is I live in a pretty remote area. There's not a whole heap of people around here. So I specifically went to a more densely populated area to do some of this work. And this particular one that I'm going to talk about was actually sitting in a cafe just with my notebook in hand, and with a question in mind. So how I start off is before I even go and sit next to people, is I think of a question that I want. And so this here is the transliteration Arabic for my question, which is essentially, should I stay in my current job? So at the time I was really experiencing some difficulty in my job, and I wanted to know whether I should stay or not. The reason I did that was because historically my family have a very, very strong work ethic, to the point where it can actually be a hindrance to ourselves. So we will stick with the ship, even though we see that it's sinking. And I didn't necessarily want to repeat that pattern. And so I sought divination to source my answer for myself, whether I should stay or whether it was sort of a historic family kind of approach to work and to work ethics. So the transliteration is essentially, should I stay in my current job? So that was my question. So I took just that. It was a blank page, and I took that along to a cafe. You have to excuse my cat in the background. She's running around and having a great old time. So I took that along and sat down. And I'm reasonably well versed in meditation and entering into trance state. And I will do some videos on those two things at some point. So I utilized the 10 seconds in, breathing in technique of meditation to enter into a meditative state. And so I did that. So I did my breathing, entered into a meditative state. Part of what I do when I meditate is I often do what I call asemic writing. So this all here, this squiggly stuff. So you can sort of see that this starts off quite, reasonably, even though it makes no sense, it starts off, reasonably legible. And then as I enter into a bit further of a state, you can start to see that it sort of shifts into this sort of nonsensical kind of just squiggle stuff. I do a lot of squiggling. I do sigils and I squiggle a lot. So so I sat there and entered that state, and that was part of it, sort of doing this automatic writing or asemic work to enter into that state. Then what I do is it's difficult to describe, but I lift part of myself out of that state, and I tune into what the people that I was sitting next to were saying. And there were two women. It sounded like they were having a great time. It was really lovely to be around them. They had really, cool, positive vibes about them. And so I lifted myself out of my state, and I paid attention to, just in that moment, what they were saying. And what they said, one woman, she was laughing, and she just said, she literally said, "Better the devil you know." So I just scribbled that down there, "Better the devil you know." Better the devil you know. Okay. That's all I needed. So I closed my book at that point, and came out of my meditative or trance state, and enjoyed my coffee, and came home and then reflected on "Better the devil you know" as part of the experience of fālgūš, or of Persian divination, through listening to other people's conversations. So what I did then was I wrote out "Better the devil you know." So I wrote that out at the top. Then what I did was I took out all of the duplicated letters, and I ended up with this sort of random kind of lot of letters here. Then the next line is me putting them, I should say this is all during sort of a meditative state, so an altered state. Then I started to make words out of them, and that line there that you can see there was the first attempt, and then I sort of changed some of the letters around so that it felt right to me intuitively. It felt good. It felt like I can work with that. So what I ended up with was Betri Yan Van. Betri Yan Van. And so I then entered into a deeper state of meditation and just chanted as a mantra. Essentially, I turn these answers into mantras. Betri Yavan, Betri Yavan, Betri Yavan, and I did that over and over. Now, prior to turning this into a mantra and chanting this repeatedly, the thing that I did was I acknowledged that, okay, so my answer is better the devil you know, which essentially to me is stick around, because you know the field, you know the playing ground, you know the layout. It's a bit uncomfortable at the moment, but it's better the devil you know. So what I did then, before I actually entered into an altered state and into repeating the mantra over and over, I visualized my workplace, and I just visualized, I can see it now, but I visualized just this beam of light coming down there, like this white light, and it sort of streams down, and then it kapow, but kapow. It's sort of like, kapow's not a great word, but it like sort of just like bounces off the center point of my office and spreads to every single corner, every single wall of that space. And when I can visualize that in my mind, this glowing light, and it's just like, it feels really good. It's like really feels very cleansing. That is when I enter into the mantra Betri Kya Van, Betri Kya Van, and on I go. And so I'm visualizing that state, and I'm saying the mantra over and over again. And so what that does for me is it essentially embeds, almost subconsciously, because my mantra no longer makes sense. It's like not words. It's just it's a pattern of letters and a pattern of sounds. So adding the visualization, or adding the mantra to the visualization, really worked very well. We had so I did that. I do things in sort of, I don't know, 3s, 7s, 11s. It's a whole another episode, but I do things in groups. So I did that for 3 nights in a row, and then I returned to work. And from that point onwards, a whole heap of things shifted in the workplace. Still a little bit uncomfortable, still a little bit difficult, but I knew that was where I was meant to be. And even though things were still a little bit difficult, they were easier. And I felt like a light at the end of the tunnel. I felt purpose again. I felt direction. I felt connected to the workplace. I felt motivated. I felt all these things that I hadn't felt. So really what this comes back to, and I've got example after example in this book of questions that I would ask, in the style of fālgūš, in the style of listening to other people's answers for me, because I couldn't see my way out. Like I couldn't really give myself a conscious answer. It was full of bias, full of questions. So once I decided to really embrace this type of prophecy, or this type of prophetic or fortune-telling style, everything from that moment over those months, I really just embraced and took as an absolute. I had an absolute belief that whatever question I would put out there, the answer that I would hear was the right answer for me. And like I said, I've got example after example, but it actually worked really well for me. So hopefully you can get something from this video. I'll put the steps below in the actual video itself. Pretty easy to do, I believe. If you're not familiar with entering into a meditative state or entering into a trance state, you might want to practice some of that beforehand. There's a few good apps out there that work well. Headspace is one of them that sort of, instructs you on how to enter into a meditative state. It gives you some guidance. There's meditative timers out there. On Spotify there's guided meditation. There's a whole heap of ways for people to be able to really work on that area. So I do think as part of fālgūš, it is essential that you're able to enter an altered state of some sort, and that's what I did, and it worked out really well. And there's a number of answers in my book. There's a number of questions, there's a number of answers, and so far they're coming to fruition, and I know that the rest of them will come to fruition. It's just a matter of time. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to a bit more about Persian fortune telling, or morva, fāl, tafa'al is another word for it. Google Persian fortune telling, and you'll come up with a whole heap of information around that and how it's been historically used, both in an Islamic context. And also, in methods that sort of predate Islam, so Zoroastrianism, even predating that. So there were obviously a group of gypsies and a group of Persian sorcerers who were outcasts from any particular religion at the time, and fortunately they've had their works documented throughout time. The other thing I would recommend looking up would also be Yalda So Yalda the Persian celebration or Iranian celebration of Yalda is very interesting to read about as well. That's where it's a time of year. It's the longest night. It's a time of year where many people use the Bible as a form of prophecy, which I do also. So it's fascinating to read about anyway. So I hope that gave you a bit of an insight into the way in which I go about practicing fālgūš and some of the results that I've had. Thanks.